Hi, welcome to Reddit Audio Stories official channel. We hope you will have fun with us. I appreciate your visit to my channel dedicated to love stories. I encourage you to subscribe and give it a thumbs up as it serves as great motivation for me to create new content. Enjoy watching. I knew things had changed when Bradley Elijah came back to town. He was at one time the fiancé gave my wife learn Bradley had broken up with her a year before I met her. She made no secret that Bradley had broken her heart when he decided to break up with her and marry a rich woman. 10 years older. I started dating Charlotte. She didn't have the appeal of a model or a movie star, but she was very pretty. She had brown hair, brown eyes, and a beautiful face. But it was her loving heart that attracted me to her the most. We married a year later and our little Victoria was born 9 months later. Life was good for 18 of our 19 years together. We had our disagreements, but nothing serious until recently. Usually our fights arose when we share responsibilities, as Charlotte was the only child in the family and her parents spoiled her. However, over the years, she learned to control her stubbornness. When our daughter Victoria was born, she became my little princess. We were especially close and our family was very cordial. However, in the last year, Charlotte and I seemed to be drifting apart. I began to notice that we were doing less together. However, we were making love very well, making love at least twice a week and more often. Charlotte seemed happier when we called. I knew she loved me deeply. I still love Charlotte, but in a different way. It was no longer like the burning, passionate love we had felt when we were first married. We were like two old shoes that had known better times but fit together well. Still, I love my wife dearly, and most of all, I love the life we had built. When Victoria finished high school, the changes in Learn seemed to accelerate. She seemed to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and the closer it got to the time when Victoria would be leaving for college, the more uncomfortable Charlotte became. I was now the chief of detectives for the sheriff's department, having 32 detectives under me. Since this was not a high-crime county, the job was not too stressful. Charlotte was still working as a dental hygienist. About a month after Victoria left for college, Bradley showed up at a barbecue hosted by a couple, Elijah and Diana Evans, who were more Lauren's friends than mine. However, Elijah and I got along very well as he owned a security company and we always had a lot to talk about. I had no idea Bradley would be there, but Charlotte certainly did. She immediately turned away from me, which was not uncommon, and started pacing around. An hour later I went looking for her and found her in Bradley sitting on the porch. When I approached, Charlotte's face was slightly flushed, which meant she was up to something I wasn't going to like. She quickly introduced me to Bradley and my stomach turned as a cop. I had developed an inner instinct and mine was telling me this was a real problem. Charlotte tried to pretend like she was surprised to see him and they were just reminiscing about old times, but her face turned red. As she explained, I decided I wasn't going to blow things out of proportion. As a police officer, I am often faced with extremely unpleasant situations. However, you have to handle them calmly and professionally. Sometimes that can be very difficult. The next business day after the barbecue, I checked on Bradley through my channels. I learned that his wife had died of cancer a year ago. In all those years, Bradley hadn't even had a speeding ticket, little on other problems with the police. As the months went by, we saw Bradley more and more often. I knew it wasn't an accident, so I started preparing for the worst. I assumed that at any moment Charlotte would want to talk to me about something. But as prepared as I was, Charlotte blew me away when she decided to do it. We had just finished a rare morning sex session and I thought, maybe all my worries have been for nothing. It became clear to me that Charlotte still loved me as much as ever. Connor, I want to talk to you about something, she said nervously, and I don't want you to get mad. I want you to let me finish before I say anything. My stomach churned. You know, Bradley was my first love, she explained. We were engaged then. He fell in love with Catherine and we broke up. When his wife died, he was devastated. He's so lonely. He tells me he still loves me and I have to admit that I still love him. But at the same time I love you. I didn't say a word and tried my best to control my breathing and stay calm. That gave Charlotte courage because she smiled and continued. I still want to be your wife, but I also want to be with Bradley. Bradley and I talked it over and decided it would be fair for me to stay with you for a week and him for a week. I got out of bed, got dressed and left without a word. I walked to my office and closed the door. The receptionist looked at my unshaven face but didn't ask. I told her I didn't want to be disturbed unless it was something serious. I was left alone. I spent hours sitting in the Enlet office. I went over my wife's proposal endlessly. It was the most selfish thing I could have done. It was clear to me that Charlotte wanted to sit in 2 chairs. That was out of the question. She would have to choose. Around 5 o'clock I got home. I was very upset when I saw Bradley's car in the driveway. I tried to calm down and use all my years of police training to keep my cool. However, all that training did not prepare me for something like this. I found them in the living room, sitting nervously. Charlotte quickly got up and came over to me to kiss me. I pushed her away and saw that. It hurt, but I didn't care. "We need to talk about this," Charlotte said nervously. "We have nothing to talk about." I replied briefly. "Either you want to be with that as Shoal or you want to be with me. You can't have him and me." "I don't think you thought this proposal through," Bradley said, looking at me nervously. "I'm not going to take your wife away from you. I'm just going to give her the extra love she needs. Yes, we'll share her, but she'll never miss any of her marital obligations." Now my inner rage was almost about to boil over that smug Baatar had just told me that I should let Charlotte sleep with him because she needed the extra love. They both made me shudder, and at that moment I realized that my marriage was over, except I said, blaring fiercely at Bradley, "The marital duty to forego all others. No, I'm not going to go along with that." "Connor," Charlotte said with an expression that told me she was now upset with me. "It's going to happen. The question is whether or not you're going to participate." "No." I said, "Both. If you leave." Charlotte burst into tears. "Connor, please get this to me. I've been a faithful wife all these years. Bradley was my first love, but I don't want to lose you. I love you very much, but I love Bradley too." I snorted and looked at Bradley. "Tell me, Bradley, if your late wife had made you a similar offer, would you have accepted it?" He smiled at me and nodded. "If it could make my wife happy, I'd gladly accept it." "Well, shit." I sat with more force than I intended, but I wanted to continue my thoughts. So I turned to Charlotte. "What about you, Charlotte? If I came home with an ex-girlfriend and told you that I wanted you to share me with her, how would you feel about that?" Charlotte hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "I'd probably be mad like you are now. But in the end, I'd agree because I really love you and I want you to be happy." "More bullshit," I said, shaking my head. "I'm going to contact my lawyer in the morning to negotiate the divorce. I think the division of assets should be pretty straightforward. The house only has a small mortgage. Once it's paid off, we'll split the proceeds. Our investments, savings and checking accounts will be divided. Victoria's college fund will remain intact. There will be no alimony since you'll be living with the jerk sitting there now. Both of you please leave." Charlotte was crying her eyes out as Bradley grabbed her hand. Walking to the door, Charlotte turned to me and said, "If you change your mind, I love you very much. I want you in my life." As soon as they left, I was overcome with silence in the house. I felt empty inside, but my ears in the course had taught me to resist. I put the wound in the box and closed the lid. Then I went to my office and started making a list of what I needed to do. I knew exactly what kind of lawyer I was going to get. Her name was Megan Gray. She had a reputation for being a real shark in divorce proceedings. She usually represented the wives and the poor husbands never knew what hit them. Over the years our paths crossed. I helped her many times when she needed it. I looked over the list and realized there was something I hadn't done yet. I need to call Victoria and let her know what's going on. It was breaking my heart to have to tell my daughter what her mother was doing. It took Victoria 5 minutes to calm down so I could really understand her. "What happened next was a surprise. That fucking bitch did this to you, Dad," she said, venomous. "All these years you've been so good to her, to us, and now she stabs you in the back. If she does that, I want nothing to do with her," Victoria said calmly. "You are very upset right now and I understand how you feel. But Charlotte is your mother and she loves you unconditionally. Don't ruin your relationship with your mother over this. We will all lose if you do. Can't you wait at least a few days before you talk to her? What if she calls me? Ask Victoria. If she does, I'll tell her the whole story. Please, if she calls, don't answer for a few days, promise me. You'll do that." Victoria reluctantly agreed to comply with my request. Later that evening, Charlotte called me very worried. She had tried to call Victoria but had been unable to. I explained that I had spoken to her and that our daughter was obviously upset. I explained to Charlotte that Victoria wanted to calm down before talking to any of us about it. "I bet you turned her against me," Charlotte accused me. "I bet you painted the most disgusting picture you could." "Charlotte, how can I paint a worse picture than you've already painted?" I said calmly, knowing it would infuriate her. "Her mother wants her father to let her sleep with another man." Before Charlotte could say anything, I decided to address one of the items on my list. "Now that I have you on the hook, you should hire a lawyer. Please. Connor, don't do this," she cried again. "It's killing me that you want me out of your life. I love you so much. Can't you give in to me a little?" "There's nothing to discuss, Charlotte," I told her and hung up the phone. I took the next week to concentrate on getting everything in order, but the nights were horrible. I felt unbearably lonely in bed. In the morning I would get up to get Charlotte, only to remember why she wasn't there. The first thing I did was call Megan, but I got a nasty surprise when she told me Bradley had already called her that Brassard was secretive. He must have already figured out who the best divorce lawyer was, and now he had beat me to it. Well, if I can't hire you, I said, somewhat offended, can you recommend someone I should hire? I told her that Bradley had contacted me. Megan snorted. I didn't say he'd hired me. In fact, I told him you'd already hired me. Wow, I said with great relief. I really appreciate you doing this. Connor, most of the men in this town think I'm a piece of shit. He said bitterly, you are one of the few who have always treated me with respect. You're one of the few who has gone out of your way to help me. I've always appreciated that there is no way I would ever turn against you. I am very grateful. You'll still have to pay my fee, he said with a laugh. I'm very grateful, but I also have to pay for the lights. No problem. Megan, and thanks again. Even days later, the phone conversation between Charlotte and Victoria did not go well. According to both of them, it degenerated into a shouting match with ugly insults back and forth. Charlotte called me afterwards almost hysterical about losing her daughter forever. I told her I would talk to Victoria and try to work things out, but it turned out to be much more difficult than I could have imagined. Victoria was angry when I spoke to her a week later. According to my daughter, she had told her mother that she wanted nothing to do with her. Charlotte would not be invited to the prom or wedding, and if she had grandchildren, she would never meet them. Now she understood why Charlotte was hysterical. Charlotte's calls continued until the day of the divorce. She kept begging me to reconsider and go along with her. Plan I, of course, continued to refuse. After the divorce, the call stopped and I tried to move on. Good thing, I had a job as chief of detectives. My schedule was quite flexible. Over the next 6 months I became much more hands-on. I was often able to point some of my new detectives in the right direction. That way, they weren't wasting time getting into dead ends. I also began to review our unsolved cases. Through my efforts, we were able to close a long-forgotten murder case. It turned out that the victim's ex-boyfriend had done it. They always had the evidence, but they just didn't see it for that. They gave me a commendation and a raise. Charlotte and Bradley got married a month after the divorce. They wanted to buy my half of the house, but the thought of Bradley living in my house upset me. Bradley threatened to go to court to force me to sell it. I told him to go ahead and sue me. I was friends with all the appraisers in town, and when I explained my dilemma, they all agreed to help me. The appraisals were much higher than the house was worth, but Bradley didn't care. He paid a ridiculously high price for my house. It pissed me off, but there was nothing I could do about it. In the end, though, I liked the result. I had a lot more money out of the sale than I could have. The divorce went better than I thought it would. I have Megan to thank for that. Her analysis was so thorough that she found information that helped me. The down payment on the house I inherited from my grandfather. Therefore, the amount was not considered community property. As a result, I received about 75% of the sale proceeds. With that money, I bought an apartment in cash, not far from work. Life goes on, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt all, although it took years with Charlotte, and here she decided I wasn't enough. I tried to get back into the dating scene, but it was even more depressing. Most of the women I dated came with a lot of baggage. Some were just plain intimidating, and almost all of them desperately wanted to get married. I, on the other hand, wasn't interested in marriage. I'd been there. One night, about 8 months after Bradley and Charlotte's wedding, I was having dinner at a restaurant. I didn't realize they were there until Charlotte sat down. I was surprised to see my ex-wife but decided I wasn't going to be obnoxious. I looked around and saw Bradley sitting at a table on the other side, studying the menu. How are you, Connor? Charlotte asked, reserved. I'm fine, and replied with a sad smile, how are you doing? I still miss you every day, he said, placing his hand on mine. I still love you very much. If you ever find it in your heart to accept Bradley, I would love to be with you again. At first I was going to take my arm off his and tell him to go for a walk, but then 90 yet occurred to me. I would have to talk to Victoria first, but it might be something I could do to get back at that jerk Bradley. I miss you too, Charlotte. I admit honestly. I hate waking up and you're gone, but you're a married woman now. By the way, I think your husband is looking for you. Charlotte looked at Bradley and he was looking at her with a what the hell expression. She just nodded to her husband and got up. Remember, I still love you. Later that night I called Victoria and explained what I wanted to do. At first she was horrified and told me I was giving myself to that slut. Then I explained why I wanted to do it and she started giggling. The giggles turned into guffaws. That's great, Daddy. Victoria finally said do it. The next day I called Charlotte with my daughter's blessing. I told her I wanted to talk to her in Bradley. I told her I was thinking about our conversation yesterday. Charlotte was delighted and we arranged to meet at our old house at 7 o'clock that evening. I arrived at 7 o'clock. Charlotte led me into the living room. It was disheartening to see him sitting on the couch in my old house. However, I took some satisfaction in the look of annoyance on his face. It was clear to me that Lon had blamed the meeting on Bradley. At the last minute, she glared at me. I pretended not to notice anything. After pouring us each a cup of coffee, Charlotte settled on the couch between Bradley and me. I got straight to the point. Charlotte, what did you mean when you said the offer to share still stood? A smile appeared on Charlotte's face. Yes, of course, the offer still stands. I've already told you that I still love you deeply. It's just that I love Bradley too. Well, if you agree. I said, trying to fend nervousness. I'd say yes. I don't have anyone right now, at least this way. I'll have you for part of the time. I've been lonely without you. Charlotte pounced on me. She kissed me as passionately as we had ever kissed before. Oh Connor, you've made me the happiest woman in the world. Wait a minute. Bradley said, standing up, we haven't discussed this yet. It's the same thing you suggested. I told Bradley calmly, yes, but still. Charlotte, you and I need to discuss it first. Bradley was very excited. We've already discussed it, Charlotte said, a little surprised by Bradley's objection. When have we discussed it? Bradley brushed, don't forget. We discussed it before we presented the plan to Connor. You said you were more than willing to share. Bradley felt the scotch by his own words and there was nothing he could do about it. Still, he wasn't going to give up that easily. I still think we need to talk about it. The thought of pointing out to Bradley what a hypocrite he was on my tongue. It was the same deal he had offered me. But now the shoe was on the other foot. He was the husband and I was the ex. However, I decided to let this drama play out between Charlotte and Bradley without my involvement. Okay, I'll go and wait to hear from you, Charlotte, I said, kissing her before I left. Once back in the car, I started laughing out loud. I had turned the tables on this Ashok. Now he was squirming like a worm. I wish he had been a fly on the wall that night. The next day, I got a call from Charlotte saying that Bradley was very upset, but when she told him she was going away, he agreed. Charlotte would spend a week with me and a week with Bradley. Of course, at Bradley's insistence, none of this could be done until I was tested for STDs. I agreed on the condition that they both get tested as well. Lauren didn't object, but Bradley was not happy as it turned out we were all clean. The following week I stopped by to pick Charlotte up. Charlotte looked good when she came to the door. Bradley, on the other hand, looked like he had murder on his mind. I grabbed Charlotte and kissed her heart. Then I grabbed her 2 suitcases and we headed out. I decided I would do everything I could to make tonight special. I took her out to dinner and then to the dance. Then we went back to my apartment. I want you inside me, she whispered huskily. When you're inside me, I know you still love me. I love Charlotte, but not enough to want her to be my wife again. We lay there and cuddled until I fell asleep. The week went by quickly and very pleasantly. I had to work, so I told Charlotte she could go home for the day if she wanted. Charlotte insisted that she was my wife for the whole week. That made me shut her inside. But hell, if that's what she wanted to believe, that was fine with me. All I was interested in was fucking Bradley's wife. She cleaned the house, went shopping, did my laundry, cooked the meals, and even set the time for our dinners. I had a great time. I even got Victoria to talk to her mother without yelling at her. Of course, Victoria was aware of my plan, and I'm sure she was laughing at how clueless her mother was. As I drove Charlotte home, Bradley looked both happy and angry. Whatever anger was simmering inside him, he kept it under control. He kissed Charlotte passionately in front of me. I gave him a kiss on the cheek, said I love you, and walked away. Over the next 3 months, our new arrangement was fulfilled. I have to say, for me, this arrangement was great. Fucking Laura after the divorce was a success, mostly because it was her suggestion. I was now fucking 6 or 7 times a week. Another benefit of this new arrangement was that I convinced Victoria to come home and spend some time with us. I'm not sure if my daughter did this because she missed her mother or if she was teasing her one day. Maybe 2 months after this new arrangement began, I was checking on my 3 teams of detectives working different crime scenes. At that time I received a call on the radio about a disturbance at Jacob's Tavern. Since I was only a block away, I decided to check it out for myself. When I arrived, I discovered that there had been an altercation with a drunk customer. I was surprised to learn that the drunk was Bradley. I decided to take care of the problem. After letting the 2 agents go, I turned to Bradley. Come on, Bradley, I said, taking his hand. I'll take you home. I don't need your fucking help. Bradley, your choice is either I take you home or you go to jail. What's better for you? He decided to take the road home all the way to my old house. We didn't say a word when he got out of my car. All he said was fuck you. By the 4th month, Bradley was becoming less and less happy with our arrangement. He and Charlotte were arguing more and more. He wanted to end, but Charlotte didn't understand why. I didn't interfere in their arguments. I merely told Charlotte she was wonderful and continued to have all the sex I wanted for a week. This arrangement allowed me to sleep with her much more than when we were married. Finally, when I came to pick Charlotte up for a week 5 months after our agreement, things came to a boiling point. Bradley and Charlotte were yelling at each other in the yard. I decided to try to calm them down. "I think you should calm down," I said with a smirk, "or someone will call the police. Fuck you." Bradley threw any before turning back to Charlotte. "If you go with him, our relationship is over. We had a deal." "Bradley," she said, with a nasty note in her voice. As long as I've known Bradley, I've never seen my ex-wife address her new husband with anything but affection. "The arrangement is bullshit," Bradley shouted. "And I'm telling you again. If you go with him, it's over. You can't be serious." Charlotte said dismissively, "You came up with the idea of the exchange a long time ago with those words." Bradley stormed into the house and slammed the door shut. I looked at Lon questioning. "He's just having a bad day," Charlotte said. Grabbing my hand, "It will pass and everything will go back to normal." Things didn't go back to normal. Apparently Bradley had moved out. Charlotte tried to talk to him, but he was adamant. They were done around me and on Wednesday. Charlotte called me and told me what had happened. She left me. "Connor," she said sobbing. "Can I move in with you?" "Yes, I'll be at your house on Monday when it's my normal week," I said cheerfully, "but Bradley is gone." Charlotte said. Confused, "I want to move back in with you completely. I realize I made a big mistake. Everything Bradley said about sharing was bullshit to keep us apart. I want things to go back to the way they were." "Well, you see, Charlotte," I said, feigning embarrassment. "You wanted me to share you. You didn't want me to work full-time, so I'm used to you being just a part-time wife. I don't think that's changed with Bradley's departure, so you still want me to pick you up on Monday." Charlotte started sobbing uncontrollably and there was silence. For a moment, I thought she had hung up, but the bitter sobs resumed. Finally, after several attempts, Charlotte regained her speech and stammering said, Yes, please Connor. I would very much like you to pick me up on Monday." Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments. Put likes, share with friends and subscribe to the channel.